very good and very good and substantive voice on the digital platforms, whereby we're not just speaking, but we know how to reach to the audiences. So I don't know if he's already on. Nelson, have you seen Philip on the?
Not yet.
Yeah. Let me just get a hold of him. Welcome, Philip. Welcome to the KNH-UoN platform. My name is Amina Gulid. I'll be moderating the session today, and with us is Philip Ogola. He's known as the digital humanitarian, as you can see his name. Philip has worked with many organizations, including our Ministry of Health, WHO Kenya, KMPDU, NMS. And he's known this, I'm sorry, I have a tongue twist there, but he's a non-dyslexic person. And he's done so much awareness and advocacy in the health space on that specific matter, but even more. He's done a lot of coverage during COVID and was actually awarded the Mzalendo Award for the amazing work he's done, including even starting Zumba classes for healthcare workers. So, Philip, how are you?
I'm very fine, and I'm really honored just to. This is my first speaking opportunity after being diagnosed with the dyslexia and ADHD. So I just want to speak from a dyslexic perspective, and my morning is very good. I'm looking forward to just engage with the medics here. And one thing I'll tell you, Dr. Guled, is social media is a very powerful tool. And storytelling has to move from data to health to science. It has to have human touch points, and that's the role which I'm looking at speaking at today. And I just want to make it more of an engaging kind of conversation. So I don't know if I'm supposed to go ahead or I'm still doing introduction.
No, you can go ahead, Philip. You can go ahead. Take us away with your audience.
All right. Once again, thanks so much. And I'll be very honest. Nowadays, I like, first of all, bringing my audience up to speed of who I am. I'm just a 46-year-old father of two who was recently diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD. And my dyslexia and ADHD have given me a gift of telling stories from a human perspective, a gift of seeing gaps, a gift of seeing repetitions, a gift of using innovative ways of just simplifying stories into human touch points. And by the way, I have no college education, I have no university education, just for the record. So everything I've done through self-taught. I've taught myself stuff on YouTube, and I also have a gift where I'm highly intuitive. I see things people don't see. My dyslexic brain makes me look at things from a 360 perspective. So when you look at the health spectrum, I have covered health from a 360 perspective, where I look at health from a government perspective, from a donor perspective, from a health professional perspective, from a patient perspective, from a caregiver perspective, and even from a media perspective. So when I look at digital, social media for me it's a great tool where we can collaborate and create content. And just to bring my background is I have worked for Kenya Red Cross for 5 years, where I was the head of digital, and Red Cross taught me the art of telling stories at emergency response scenarios. I got front row access to nearly all disasters. As in, I got access to nearly all the hospitals, casualties, emergency response ecosystems. And through that, I got to learn the linkages in terms of telling stories. At times, when we tell stories, we only tell stories from a hospital perspective, but we don't look at it from an ambulance perspective, or a responder perspective, or a police perspective, or a road safety perspective. So I've also worked and consulted for the Nursing Council of Kenya, where I helped build the digital strategy. I even introduced the CEO to social media, the chairman to social media, and even trained the nursing community on storytelling. I've also managed and advised the Kenya Medical Research Institute, where I also trained them on digital storytelling. And I've also managed the Kenya Medical Doctors Union in human interest storytelling, the Nursing Association. I've also advised the Nairobi Metropolitan Health Promotion Unit in terms of telling content from a human perspective. And I've also managed the Ministry of Health social media, where during the health summit in 2019 or 2018, I was the one who came up with the digital strategy for the health summit and managed that whole campaign. I've also managed the Ministry of Health during the COVID pandemic. So if you saw posts during the COVID pandemic, that was me. I managed it, the ministry from, I think, March to April during the height of COVID. I've also advised the government spokesman. I've advised WHO. I've advised the presidential UHC communications committee. I've advised the country's emergency response committee. I've advised the fire response committee, GBV, Spectrum. I've sat in mental health committees. I've been to Mathare so many times. So how my brain works is I use my intuition to tell stories, and I use emotions because I'm able to read people. I'm able to read people's emotional baggage. That's the gift I have. So I'll give an example of how, let's say, Kenyatta and Nairobi University of Nairobi can tell stories better. Is already stories are being told, and I'm sorry to say this, my brain makes me pick patterns. My brain makes me see repetitions. My brain makes me see opportunities or gaps into storytelling. So when I look at the health communication in Kenya, from the national level to the county level, there is a repetition the way stories are told, where stories are only told from a research perspective, stories are only told from a scientific perspective, stories are only told from a government perspective. So we rarely get to hear stories of health workers. We rarely get to hear the human side of health workers. We rarely get to see the face of mothers as health workers, or as fathers, or as young men, and that's the disconnect. And for me, being at Nursing Council of Kenya, I got to learn the scope of practice of nurses, licensing, the examination, and even did rounds with nurses just in wards. So there's so much stories which are not being told. We only get to see stories of health from a workshop perspective or a launch perspective, but you don't get the human touch points. Another gap I saw, there's no collaborations where, let's say, for example, there's a COVID pandemic. Can we have stories where we get to see the donors? That's like the WHO, the Pfizer, the UN, the private sector being part of the story, where they fundraise for this project, they fund this project. Then you get to see the hospitals or the government from the policy perspective. Then you get to see stories from doctors, from nurses, from lab technicians. And there's one critical storytelling arm which is normally not documented. This is the frontline workers. These are the essential workers. These are the cleaners. These are the cooks, the people who do laundry, the security guards, the admin people, the people who do triage at hospitals. But you find that health promotion is just focused on health perspective, and we forget the whole ecosystem around hospitals. So one of my biggest strengths is to see gaps, and I saw gaps across all platforms, where you find we will only communicate health issues during global days. And
sorry, Philip. Sorry for the interruption. Thank you very much for the introduction. So for it to be more engaging, I'll just throw in a few questions to highlight more things. For instance, with the nursing and everything of that sort, what story what story captivated you the most? Because, you know, for us, it's a day in, day out business, and it's usually nice when somebody from the outside comes to actually introduce and teach us what's going on, and some things we take for granted as healthcare workers. And I love the way you're talking about laundry, you're talking about the security guard. They do a lot in a hospital setting. So what story, what story, for example? Yeah.
One of the best stories, which is still, is I met two nurses during the COVID pandemic. I went to the Kenyatta Hospital COVID unit in Pagadi. And while I was there, I could read the nurses' emotions. Where for me, I always like engaging nurses when they're eating. I'm like, can I eat with you? Can I just get to hear your stories? And most of them were talking, were like, I've never had makeup done for 3 months. I've not gone to dance for 3 months. I've not seen my family for 3 months. You know, as in, they were grappling with burnout, emotional trauma, but these stories were never anywhere in the media. All we saw were statistics of the pandemic or donations of PPE, what do they call those uniforms? So you find, as I sat with them, I got to understand their struggles, their pain, their trauma. And that's the story which we don't get to see in the media. That's the story we don't get to see in communication campaigns. And as I engaged them more, I decided to do one nurse story. I did her story, and I think she was called Winnie Kabura and Zedi Komen. I just did. Winnie had hair which was designed like she had a funny hairstyle like a corona. So I did her story, posted on the Ministry of Health social media account, and that story got, I think, over 1,500 comments. And all of them were patients talking about how they remember her being in the psychiatric ward, how their children remember her. So you find that there are so many stories patients know of nurses, but nurses are not out there telling those stories. And then as I engaged her more, she started crying. She told me that they had gone to party that night, and when she came back, she found the mother of her patient crying that her child had died. So you can imagine the mother was there telling, as in, she left the baby okay, but coming back, that child had passed on, and the mother was there weeping. And that nurse went into trauma mode, and she was crying. She was like, Philip, that's how our work is. So that pain is not captured in stories. That struggle, that human side. And when I sat down with nurses, there are those people who bring their food, those people who clean their uniform, those support staff, the security men. We don't get to hear their stories. So I did those stories, and those stories were the most read stories on the Ministry of Health account. So for me, what I'm looking at for nurses is, if we can see the human side of nurses, if we can see them as human, we are going to end a lot of stigma. We are going to have a lot of people now listening to nurses, and nurses, to me, are the bedrock of communications in health, where they can talk about preventive messages, where they can talk about, health protocols, what to do, do's and don'ts. And by the way, nurses to me are, I did a couple of stories of nurses just dressed in home clothes, in mini dresses, in dancing to music. And guys were like, can we see more such content? So for me, my best stories of nurses are not at their work. It's about off their work, because we're so used to seeing nurses at work that we don't see them as humans. We see them as supermen. Yeah.
So what I would, in line with the topic today, in terms of amplification of healthcare workers, there's the individual capacity and there's the organizational capacity. In both aspects, what advice would you give them to amplify preventative messages so that we can have a bigger voice in the social media platform?
I'll give you an example about preventative messages. Let's say, for example, mental health. You find that most people don't understand the signs and symptoms. And the people who understand the burden of the disease burden of mental health are nurses, because they're the ones who on a day-to-day with the patient. So if you can get specialized nurses in psychiatrics talking about different strains of disorders, like the time I was at Madare, I got to understand different nurses in And each of them were talking to me every day. They were like, hey, you can do this way. Today you've improved. Today you're doing what? You know, if we can get such stories where nurses, and from a government perspective, there's no policy to guide nurses to speak on social media, where you find that most hospitals, and even government hospitals and private hospitals, there's a social media, there's a policy where medics are not supposed to speak, health workers are not supposed to speak. I think that's something which we can work with the medical board to see if now there can be policies to allow doctors, nurses, lab, you know, to start sharing stories to complement the hospital. And also on the hospital bit, there needs to be a calendar of events. Like, let's say we've just celebrated World Suicide Day. We've just celebrated World Mental Health Day. Where are the stories of nurses? Where are the stories of doctors? As in, people only share negative stories of the hospitals because the hospitals don't share the positive stories, the success stories. So the only frustration people share is their trauma. Oh, my father died in hospital. Yeah. So for me, I'm looking at it, first of all, we must look at policy. There must be a policy to guide nurses on telling stories on social media. There must be a policy in hospitals to have, like, I believe there's a big disconnect from the government communication, the UN communication, the private sector communication. It needs to be like a joint collaboration. Let's say, for example, road safety. For road safety, you'll find NTSA are the one pushing road safety. How about we bring on board NHIF? How about we bring on board Kenyatta? How about we bring on board, you know, nurses from different sectors, from the spinal unit, nurses at casualty, nurses at the burn unit, where each of the nurses can actually say, hey, today is Friday, unaenda kupiga sherehe, mnakunywa, mna drink, but hapa si tuko hospital, we've received 10 accident victims. Two of them are disabled because of drinking and driving. 2 of them have been stabbed because of GBV. You know, so if we can get to see the whole 360 story of road safety, let's say, can we bring on board the police? And police work with hospitals. Police work closely with the road safety NTSA. So how about we have a joint campaign where the blood bank is involved, the insurance care is involved, the mental health is involved, the nursing council is involved, the poisons board is involved, the KEMSA is involved, and all these come together, and each of them is sharing their stories from a different perspective. Like, if I can give you an example, Kenyatta has had dozens of successful surgeries, but do we get to see the team behind it? Do we get to see the surgeons? Do we get to see the nurses? Do we get to see stories of nurses just saying, today we did this surgery, today we did this procedure? As in, those positive stories are what we're actually lacking in terms of preventing and just raising awareness, because the more nurses speak, because people will listen to nurses more because they bring the vibrancy, they bring the pulse of
Clearly, and we love our nurses. I agree with you 100%. They're our bedrock in the healthcare. They really keep the system in check and all together. There's a study, I don't know if you saw it, but in line with road safety, there's a very interesting study that was done whereby the Emergency Medicine Kenya Foundation, they were actually looking at all road accidents which have been posted online. And it would be nice if we had an analysis of seeing how many social workers have actually posted. But right now, this is just random. So I don't know if you managed to get that particular study, but what are your thoughts on such things? How are us as healthcare workers supposed to use social media as a tool? I love how you've put in the aspect of policy formulation in terms of having something that actually gives us guidelines as healthcare workers to speak on social media, because at the end of the day, it's as an individual, you have to have a personal and a non-personal relation, and how you can actually intertwine the two, because we spend a lot of time in hospitals. So I think you've gotten my question there, or my gist. Over to you, Philip.
I think for me, what we lack as a country is administrative guiding principles, which can guide not only from the government level, the hospital level, and even the nurses and doctors and medics from a personal level. As in, we need to have a digital literacy program which should be pushed for, let's say, for example, from the Ministry of ICT or the Communications Ministry or ICT Authority, where they can develop those mechanics and which can guide now hospitals. And we find that is one of the biggest disconnect, where you find there's so many doctors and nurses who are quite vocal on social media on a personal level, and people like them, and I think they can't do more because they lack that framework. There's no framework for them to actually be part of the story. And then when you look at the way the ministry communicates, the way hospitals communicate, it's that tone, it's the government tone, it's the hospital tone. It lacks human elements. So what I'm looking at is if we can have a strategy, a digital strategy, which is nurse driven, doctor driven, support staff driven, and also have digital strategies, which now includes thematic storytelling. I think that would be very, very important, where you find most of the communications from the mental health practitioners, the health practitioners, nursing, doctors are just knee-jerk, where it's always about, today we've launched this program, today we've done this, our CEO has done this, our CEO has done this. When can we see stories of today nurse so-and-so in pediatric, nurse so-and-so the burn unit, nurse so-and-so in the burn ward? So what I'm looking at is we have so many policies, which are very, very fantastic. Our main problem is implementation. Our main problem is doing the same things year in, year out. So just to answer your question about that report, I've not read it yet. But what we lack is collaboration. And for me, my dyslexic mind is able to pick repetitions. And I struggle a lot when I see similar things being done year in, year out. And look at this, Amina.
Yeah, go ahead, Philip. I'm not holding you back. Go ahead.
The only time you will hear about, and mark my words, November will be celebrating 16 days of GBV from November 25th to December 5th.
Yes.
So right now, everybody is quiet. No conversation about it. And yet every day we are seeing rape cases, we are seeing GBV cases, we are seeing murder, we are seeing suicidal, ideations and stuff. Mm-hmm. Then come the 16 days of GBV, you'll see everyone on social media posting, oh, stop killing us, stop raping us, stop doing what, but nobody's talking about preventing. As in, where do we call? As in, how do you, in case, and this is something which nurses can be involved, doctors can be involved, like GBV is coming, right? But how many ladies know how to prevent rape in case a rape happens? Where do they report? Where do they get psychiatric assessment? How do they preserve evidence in case of rape? Where do they seek prosecution? These are the things we don't get to see being discussed. And the best storytellers are actually medics, are mental health practitioners who can talk about the trauma GBV people go through. And talking about, reports, Kenya has so many reports which have been done, but do we collaborate? Do we sit down and see what are we doing wrong? And the big disconnect, Amina, is social media conversations are being driven by Gen Z. And Gen Z, I mean the 24-year-olds to probably 15-year-olds. They're the ones driving content online. They are very vibrant. But there's no one to shape that energy. There's no one to direct that energy. And this is why I'm looking at it, is if we can have a plan for the week, a plan for the month, a plan for the quarter, a plan for the year, it will be easy now to also plug in nurses. And the best way to actually start pushing preventative messages is to create a space for doctors, a space for nurses to be recognized. And at times it's not even about money. At times it's and I'll give you an example. Yesterday I was driving around and I got pissed when I saw a billboard with a nurse who has been got for, is with an image of a nurse who has been, it's those digital images which are being bought online. Where, why can't we use our nurses? Where people relate? Why can't this private sector, when they're doing their ads in health, why can't they get just nurses to talk about it? Why can't we see nurses talking about GBV, mental health, different healthcare messages? And if we can,
I agree, but the question is, I don't know if it's a challenge you get, but it's just a challenge from the top of my head is the compensation packages would start be expected, and you know, as healthcare workers, we don't even know how much it is to be a model on a poster or something of that sort, and I believe probably behind the scenes people are avoiding such cost or something of that sort. But maybe you can shed light more because you're in that industry more. And yeah,
there's so much money, and this is something which I want to be vocal about. I'm like, why don't we have a fashion model just for nurses? Why don't we have like a dancing competition just for nurses? Why don't we have influencers, content influencers for who are only nurses or doctors? Why should you hire me, someone who does not understand anything about health, to talk about health? You know, I'll give another example.
I'm sorry, I will beg to differ on that aspect, but for me, I feel like you are key because you are also on the other side. You know, the healthcare has different perspective. You know, like just data. I'm obsessed with data. Data is owned not just by the government and the hospital, but it's also owned by the patient. So you bring in a key audience and a key perspective, and that's why your voice is extremely powerful because you're able to speak from that perspective. And as a father, as a human, as you know, as a dyslexic, as an ADHD person, you know. So I'm sorry, but I had to defer that. So can continue.
You see, one of the ways which where I'm really insisting on policy, if there can be policy which can give nurses or doctors a space just to be human, it can be by organizing, you know, activities like dancing competitions for nurses. And a good example is the Zumba for nurses, which we did during the COVID pandemic. Up to today, I get nurses who are asking me, what happened to the Zumba? So if the hospitals can create an ecosystem where nurses learn to dance, to sing, to do poetry, to do art, to do charity work, you'll be shocked on the kind of skills nurses have. And for me, yeah. I really enjoy just being on TikTok. I see nurses there dancing. I see nurses there doing, you know, talking to people publicly. I see policemen talking on social media. So
yeah,
when it comes to monetizing, the nurses have to be disruptive because corporates look for people who have traction. If you're a nurse and a doctor, and already I've seen doctors who are on YouTube and are getting money. I've seen doctors on Instagram who are getting money. It's to you, first of all, to be out there so people to see your worth, people to see the kind of conversation you can ignite. So money will come if the nurses and doctors can actually create content. And I'm very sorry to say this. At times I struggle when I go to YouTube to look for Kenyan content. I don't get them.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. We have and I believe that's a whole space for content creation for the medical sector, for us as healthcare workers to actually bring our voice to the chapter, as opposed to you know, like just letting it go and flow and everything of that. So there are doctors worldwide who have actually quit their jobs to be on social media platforms because they're having a bigger impact, and it's also a good stream of revenue. So maybe that would be my next question. What kind of advices would you give healthcare workers who would want to explore that as an avenue to start? Where would they start having their preventive medicine? You've mentioned that they need to be truthful, they need to show their human side, and be relaxed. What other perspective would you advocate for?
First of all, each of the nurses, each of the doctors, the lab guys, the frontline workers, the essential workers, each of them has a task, and each of them is unique in different ways. Each of them is skilled differently. Let's say, for example, if you are a casualty nurse, every day when you go to work, take a photo of yourself at home as a mother, as a child, as a wife. You know, be human. Say, hey, Niazi, I'm going to work. This is how I cook. This is what I eat. When you get to work, take a photo of you at the triage center or the theater, bearing in mind that no patient or faces are seen, just maybe a photo of you. Do a short video and post it. consistency, have a consistent. So keep educating guys and say, hi, my name is Dr. Philip Ogola. I'm a casualty. I attend to accident victims, and start educating people on preventive messages around your skill set, around your qualification. And if you keep doing that every day, you'll start getting an audience. And then also talk to your patients. Many patients will tell your story. Many patients will actually be willingly to amplify their doctors, their nurses, and they're there. Yeah. If you can create that rapport and tell your patient, this is my Instagram, you can check my work, check what I do, and they will check your profile, they will see what you're posting, and they will give you consent to tell their stories. And there's no better testimonial like a patient giving a doctor's review or a doctor. And that's how we're going to start preventing messages where people start feeling relatable. Like when I go public about my dyslexia, when I go public about my ADHD, I get people coming to my inbox. They're saying, Philip, thank you for opening up. I can relate to your struggles. I'm also going through this. Imagine now if I can get a doctor or a nurse who can be willing to also be doing the same, so long as there's privacy, there's confidentiality. So it's very, very important where the nurses, the doctors, the medics start looking at telling stories from their own perspectives. Where even I've seen nurses cry during the COVID pandemic. They were crying. They're like, I have lost 10 patients. I can't do this anymore. People need to feel that to now get serious. And then celebrate success, those small, tiny details. When you're eating, telling guys, hey, but they am eating, and also use those moments to educate the public. Because people blame nurses for things they don't know. Let's say, for example, Amina, you've been on shift for 12 hours. You've just taken a 10-minute break to go eat. Then a patient is there in the queue, takes a photo of you saying, Dr. Amina is just eating and my father is dying here. How many guys know that? So people need to understand the kind of burden nurses are carrying, the kind of burden doctors are carrying, lab people, educate the processes, and educate people on your expertise. Just telling guys, my name is so-and-so, I'm a nurse. My job is to do 1, 2, 3, 4. For this element, if this is how you can prevent. These are the signs and symptoms. This is what, and this is how it looks before and after. And then show people how to eat well, to focus on their mental health, their spiritual health, their physical health, and just be human. At times joke. The biggest problem we have with our medical communication, it's always, scientific, don't, do this. If you don't do this, people want to see human touch points. At times, once in a while, dance to music, talk about current affairs, talk about, things you do as a mother, as a young girl, educate people, talk about your school. This is why I studied, this is why, because nurses, doctors, medics are the worst storytellers, including scientists. And this is something I've seen at Kemri, I've seen at Nursing Council.
We're very poor. We're very poor at storytelling. We have so many things that happen, and I'm going to interject a little bit. Nelson, I don't know if you can play that short video while you're setting it up. There was a video that went viral. It's actually the next thing I wanted to talk about Ronnie, and you had actually gotten a gist of the patient. You actually had a way of uniquely identifying his talent and bringing it out. I thought it was a very powerful video. How you even engaged another content creator to build his name. So let it. You can go ahead, Nelson.
Nikianza kuteta hii kuhusu suicide day, sitaki wajitoe mhanga.
Rusha mistari basi,
ninarauka asubuhi yote nijua kusakanya hizi ganji kwenye concrete jungle. Life ni double trouble, bado tuna struggle tukihustle. Tumekaza muscle, one day tulikuwa castle. Riding a big kama majaman machines, vitu tunataka kutoka kwa tunajua kurai many time naweza fanya kitu mkaifeel kana sign ya peace. Kwetu ni kiss, si upeace mpaka mabeast. At least tunabaki kwa chat. Ni nani anaweza kanionyesha utani ndani kipaji na kazi? Hata OG anajua mtu kula OB, na mtu akileta utani kwa wakadinali ni Roni mkali kwa sayari ya mistari. Nikute ni mimi naifanya bila blanda. Anytime kali naweza kanikuta east bado na feel
Thank you, Nelson. I think you can stop the video now. Yeah, so Philip, I loved this video. I loved how you brought out Ronnie. I have become a big fan of Ronnie, and I have never met Ronnie. So maybe you can walk us through how did you identify that talent? Because he's a really good rapper, and how you got somebody else to actually bring music to the rap behind, and it sounds like a classic jam. How you can take us through your thought process so that we can learn a thing or two from you.
First of all, thanks so much. And just watching that video brings tears to my eyes. And I never imagined that Ronnie's video would be played at a hospital forum, at a forum with nurses and doctors. And it shows how the power of social media can inform change. I met Ronnie during the World
Sorry, Philip, but also pharmacists, also lab techs, basically okay. The whole aspect of healthcare workers.
Nice.
I keep saying I'll tell you that, but our pharmacists are here, our lab techs are here, and we love them as well. And maybe you can.
Sorry, I have a dog here which is jumping on the laptop. She's jealous of them. So it was World Suicide Day on November 12th, and I was invited by the Madari Teaching and National Referral Hospital just to come and be part of the campaign, where there was a global cycling challenge across the world to celebrate Suicide Day. So I got there, and one of my gifts is to read people, and I read people's energy. That's one of the gifts I have, being a dyslexic. So when I was recording my videos there, I saw someone, I saw Ronnie carrying a sack, a sack, and he was dirty. So he approached me and told me he's a rapper, and he's a patient at Madare, where he's a methadone patient, and because he's addicted to heroin, so he goes there every day to get a dose of methadone to help him fight off addiction. So he
how long has he been having that addiction for?
15 years.
Wow. Okay.
So I just told him I can record you. I'll record you, then I will post on social media. Then let's see how it goes. So I tested him and I gave him words. I'm like, I want you to rap about 1, 2, 3, 4. And he rapped for 30 minutes nonstop. He could mix, rhyme, and when he was rapping, I could tell that he's a genius. His mind thinks differently. He could rhyme different words at the same time, pass a message at the same time, mix lyrics with such skill and agility. And that to me was quite baffling. So I recorded him and I told him I will do what I can. I put it on TikTok and Twitter and YouTube. And I went on with my day-to-day activities. The next day I woke up, my TikTok, I think, grew by 1,500 followers. I got dozens of inboxes from producers, from celebrities, from people around the world who wanted just to get to know more about him. And even the video just played was done by a producer called Motif. So Motif did the beat to the rap, and it shows how the power of social media, where people can identify your skill. So Motif is one of the top young producers who just did a beat without even meeting Ronnie, and it shows how music is changing. So I had to now go back to look for Ronnie. So, and this is the beauty about having networks at Madare. Madare, there's the deputy superintendent, Dr. Masi Karanja, reached out to me and told me she can get Ronnie's contact. So she gave me his brother's number. So I called the brother. I'm like, I want to meet your brother. I want to meet Ronnie. So he told me Ronnie is in Madare slums. So we had to go to Madare slums to look for him. And this is now where the story becomes juicy. I have never been to drug dens before. I went to an area called deep in Madare Valley. There's a place called Kosovo, Nigeria, Bridgestone, Colombia. These are drug dens. As in, I have never seen so much drugs and the people I saw there some of them were celebrities. Some of them were top names I see on TV. They were all there grappling with drug addiction. And each of them were telling me that they saw the video going viral. Everybody saw it. The video went viral on TikTok, on Facebook. And it shocked me how people got to support that video and saying Ronnie is talented if you can get him to rehab. So I went there just to see if I can get him off the streets. When I met him, he was in the den, he was drunk, and he was still thanking me for the video. He told me that his friends were telling me that he's trending. So I got to show him the video, and I told him, I can only support you if you can agree to go to rehab. So I made a couple of calls to people, former addicts, and they gave me that the best place to go is Eden House, which is somewhere in Parklands. So I told him that I'm going to take you there after a week, but you must promise me, first of all, that you are interested in changing, and if you can go back to your family for 2 days so that I can pick you and take you to the rehab on the third day. Can you believe that for the first time, he actually went home? His mother couldn't believe. I've never seen Ronnie being passionate about dropping the drugs and just changing, because, you know, him being a rapper, he had never got an opportunity for the first time just to get a global platform. So the next day, I called Giuliani. I called a couple of celebrities, and Giuliani told me that he can produce him. So we took him to Dandora. We took Ronnie to Dandora to see Giuliani's studio and just meet the Kalamashaka team, meet other rappers. And it was quite a teary moment for him to see other rappers in Kenya and being in the studio for the first time. And so the next day I took him to Ghetto Radio, and this is now where I saw an opportunity for him, and at times we look at people because they are dirty, because they are drunk, because they are battling drug addiction, and we tend to dismiss them. And for me, what I saw in him, I saw talent in him. So when I told him that I've booked a studio session with him on Ghetto Radio, and I told him he has to be there by 6 in the morning because the show started at 7, he was there by 5. And that told me that he's willing to change. He's willing to actually kick off his addiction. So on Ghetto Radio, he spoke deeply about his struggles with depression. And that's why I noticed that he's also dyslexic. And he told me that he was the top student in class. He was always number 1, 2, but he struggled writing, he struggled reading. So you can imagine teachers also labeled him stupid. His family labeled him stupid. That's why he actually ran away from home, because he was being punished always. He couldn't do homework. And this is another conversation where nurses can start talking about symptoms of dyslexia or ADHD or autism, because you find people in the neurodiverse spectrum struggle a lot with doing normal things, but people label them wajinga or lazy, mwendawazimu. So from Ghetto Radio, we took him to now the rehab. And remember, all these are referrals from social media. So I took him to the rehab in Parklands, Eden Home. And I met the director there, Boniface Dirangu, and he's the chairman of all the rehabs in Kenya. And he told me that Ronnie needs to be taken to a rehab which is near Mombasa, because the climate favors recovery victims. So he told me that he can arrange for him to be booked in, where they'll give half the costs, and then we can fundraise for the half the cost. As we're talking right now, Ronnie is in Mombasa, he's in Diani. He's in a 3-month recovery program where his counselor is a Russian, and he has a 12 program for him to recover. But what I can say is, and Amina, thanks for the support. As in, right now I have a Bas Kubaf, who is a Kenyan rapper based in UK. I have Nonini, there's King Kaka, there's the lady called Sage, Maji of Ghetto Radio, producer Motif, and I have a DJ in New York. I have a rapper in New York, a DJ in Michigan, a DJ in South Africa, a rapper in Ghana, and a rapper in Tanzania, all want to work with him. And it shows how social media can be used positively. And so you can imagine now if we get the doctors who are handling him to talk about this condition and even just promote his music. And one of the biggest boosts we got yesterday is the big Ted Kwaka, who is one of the ambassadors in Kenya, in America, actually played his music in Hollywood. So it shows how we have opportunities around the world where we can change stories and use, you know, stories which are negative to turn them to positive and inspire more people.
Positive stories. Yeah. Agreed. So I don't know if we have any questions from the forum. Some have asked for your number, and so a lot of people have said it's very informative discussion. And thank you, Philip. Actually, I haven't said thank you, Philip, for joining the platform and giving us a lot of your wisdoms. And may God bless you and reward you in the beautiful work you do. So Karaoke has said, thank you so much for the enlightening session. What Philip is doing very similar to what Brandon Staton started with Humans of New York. Telling real stories can change people's lives. Brandon raised almost 3.8 million for pediatric cancer research by just telling real stories in a pediatric cancer ward that involved hospital staff, parents, and patients while maintaining confidentiality. So thank you very much. I think it's more of a comment than a question in there, but maybe Philip, you'd want to respond to that comment.
Absolutely, and I can't remember the name for the feedback. And Karaoke, one of the best ways pharmacists, lab nurses, doctors, the whole medical ecosystem is just to be human. You know, at times it doesn't cost much where you say, as a doctor, I can relate to this story. You know, we only see the dark side of health. We never get to see the positive side of stories. And for me, as you're talking right now, Madare has agreed to do my documentary, where I will tell my story from Madare of how I was admitted, and I also want to do story with nurses who took care of me, the doctors there. I want to tell their stories also. And for me, I'm looking at I think I've sent my number in the chat box. I'm looking at how do we have more of such forums. And Amina, you do not know what you've started, because you see, most medics only talk about medical issues. You never look at things from a patient perspective. You never look at things from a legacy perspective. And one biggest lesson I learned last week, the other day, I got invited to the launch of the first bone marrow transplant in Kenya by Nairobi West Hospital. And when I went there, the media were focusing on the bone marrow transplant. And for me, I refused. I'm like, no, I want to know who are the doctors behind it, who are the nurses behind it. And I started with the top doctor, who is a retired doctor from Kenyatta. And I told him, Professor, tell me where you grew up, where you studied. And you'll be shocked. He went to Jericho High School in Nairobi, and he grew up in the village. So you find such stories that are not being told. So if you can get the human side of the nurses, the public, the pharmacy, the lab, they can be part of the story. And for me, storytelling is like a cog, where the nurse says her bit, the pharmacy says her bit, the lab says their bit, the research says their bit, the council says their bit, the union says their bit, the caregivers join in, and it becomes like a whole circle. And just to answer Karaoke is, I'm also planning to do a fundraiser. I'm also planning to start conversations with purpose. I want to create spaces for good and just mentor more youths and also train more medics. And I really thank you for this forum, because, most workshops have become an echo chamber. An echo chamber means it's the same people who discussing the same things among themselves, and you don't get to see stories from different perspectives. And what you've started, if you can have it a regular moment where medics just come in and ask, how do I do TikTok? How do I do Instagram? How do I do Twitter? And I'll be very honest. When I look at Twitter Spaces, I look at Clubhouse, so many medics, so many nurses globally just share stories from a professional perspective, and they have become so popular. They're making so much money. Why can't Kenyans do the same?
It's true.
We are not archiving our stories. And yesterday we did Mashujaa Day. Who are the modern day Mashujaas? And I want to ask you, do we know the first nurse in Kenya? Do we know the first doctor in Kenya? Do we know the first pharmacist? Do we know? We don't.
What's our history?
What's our history? So if you right now, you're a nurse, you're a pharmacist, you're a lab guy, you're a doctor, you're a medic, you have access to information, you have access to digital places. It's your role to start being disruptive. It's your role to tell those stories, because the doctors who trained you, the lecturers who trained you are from the previous generation, where they focused on, academics, papers and stuff. But your age right now, you have the digital space. Start doing, short stories to educate people, short stories to prevent the disasters, and just be human, and also just be yourself. Talk about music, talk about food.
Yeah. And I'll take you back to Ronnie again. Ronnie, to me, when you posted that and I asked you about how many years he's been going to Mathare, he's been going there for 15 years. I mean, 15 years is a lot of years for drug rehabilitation, and in a span of a day, you have changed. I'm sure he would. I'm not sure. Let me not say that. He would probably still have a long journey. He actually has a long journey with his drug rehabilitation, but at least he has more things to look forward to. And I think for any human being, whether you have a mental illness or you are normal or you have any issues, it's always good to have something to look forward to. And you gave him something to look forward to. And it's really a challenge to us as healthcare workers. What eye-opening do we do for our patients? How can we make their lives better? We meet with them every day, and what more can we inspire and aspire for them to be like? The same way as Dr. Gashi. I've known Dr. Gashi for a while. Never really known he went to that school, and I know more about his work and everything of that sort, but nothing on where he comes from and how much he's achieved to reach where he has. So I don't see much question. Sorry, there were questions on how does one start digital storytelling. I think you mentioned that about being consistent. Consistent is very key, and also many more people talking about giving more information and where to train and acquire these skills. So I don't know. Probably you can answer Ruth Jahogo's question on: is there a training to acquire these skills?
I'm just reading the comments here, and I'm just laughing.
Yeah,
I taught myself everything. TikTok has tutorials on do's and don'ts, everything. Instagram the same thing, Twitter the same thing, YouTube the same thing. So you as a medic, first of all, learn the tools. Don't be in all platforms. Pick one which you are comfortable with and run with it. And for you as a medic, especially in this digital age, you need to be on TikTok. TikTok is the next biggest platform. Facebook is for all people like me. It's the biggest right now. You need to be there and just be human, be consistent. Do short videos of you eating, you doing stuff, you changing, you in your scrubs, you in your doing your rounds. Before you know it, because Instagram and TikTok and Twitter pick algorithms, and algorithms gets to learn you and gets to know you based on what you post. So if you're a casualty, or you're in pharmacy, or you're doing cancer, you're doing mental health, have that consistency. Pick one hashtag, and that TikTok algorithm will understand you and start pushing your content outside, and people start noticing
to your audience.
To your audience. And then have a theme, like have a day where you talk about your work, but ensure it doesn't sound like an NGO or government. The worst storyteller, again, I'll repeat, is the government. The worst storyteller is the UN, the NGOs. They always use language which people don't relate to. So it's your role to now bring that human side, because that's how government communicates. Like, let's say we've just had the World Mental Health Day the other day. As a pharmacist, you dispense drugs every day for mental issues. As a lab, you do tests. As a nurse, you have all this. Speak about it and share your experience and say, we dispense this drug so much, it means there's a disease burden. Or we attend to a lot of trauma issues because of accidents, because of death. And even, I think I've been monitoring what you're doing on social media. you will slowly become an authority because how you tweet, even on Twitter.
I know. It's a long story, but I agree with you. And actually, I'm listening to this. I'm getting a lot of tips from this. Is because I am usually shy on showing that other aspect, but I'll try to be a bit more human.
One gift I have is when I go to hospitals, I look at hospitals from a historical perspective. So you, as a nurse, as a doctor, as a pharmacist, you're part of the storytelling ecosystem. And I'll give you an example. How many of you look at Nairobi from a history perspective? Right now, how many of you can name the Nairobi skyline? Those buildings, I can't even name them. I don't even know which is which. So you find that nobody's telling that story. Can you be the one posing there with your people look at you as a dancer, as a biker, as a what, and also as a medic. So use stories in a story to push your story. If you're going for holiday, talk about the place, meet with chefs, meet with watchmen, meet with security guard, do good, like be that person where people can remember you with. Like, if you're a doctor and you come with me with doctor stuff, I will not listen to you. But if you're a doctor who is dancing, if you're a doctor who is cooking, if you're a doctor who is a DJ, if you're a doctor who is doing charity, if you're a doctor who is just into traveling and stuff, I will start listening to you because you're speaking my language, and that's the best way to tell stories. And if you can tell stories from a relatable perspective, people will connect with it. People will heal you, people will feel you, and it doesn't cost much to cry. Be human, show people emotions, and one of the best way is to adapt with emerging trends. When you see a topic trending, like let's say, for example, the patient who was admitted at Madare, that journalist who tweeted and said that he wants his parents to release him and stuff. That story went negative. People are focusing on his drug addiction, in alcohol addiction, but people are not looking at it from a solution perspective. How many people know that people with ADHD struggle with the alcohol abuse? How many people don't? People who are in the neurodiverse spectrum struggle with suicidal ideations. So if we can get medics to come out and and this is something which I have pitched to KMPDU and the nursing association, to even the lab associations and clinical associations to try and start having a storytelling matrix where if a hospital has a surgery, can it be documented? If the hospital has, day to day, we're not telling our stories. Kenyatta has done dozens of surgeries which are phenomenal, but where are the stories? Where are the stories, man?
And I cannot agree more. And unfortunately, I had a technical. Sorry, I had a technical. Sorry, I had a technical hitch over there. As we're talking, actually, one of my friends, very good friend, is asking me if I'm getting compensation for playing in the KPCC forum in Kenyatta, and I'm just laughing. Not that I'm going to ask my organization for any money, but what is it called? It's just interesting that she asked me that question of all today. So, Philip, I cannot say thank you enough for sharing a lot with us, a lot of background information about digital space for healthcare workers and what we can do and what more we can achieve in that space. I think you have a fellowship, if I'm not wrong, on digital humanitarian. Yes. So maybe people can reach out and see how best they can do it. As you can see, his title is Digital Humanitarian. You can find him on Twitter, on TikTok, on all platforms with that specific name. So it's easy. And by the way, he's quite responsive, and he's the way he is on social media, he's true to himself. So if you reach out, I'm sure if time allows him, because as we are limited, so if it's possible for you to be in the loop, I'm sure he would respond and give you feedbacks on that. So as a parting shot, maybe Philip, you can give us your last parting shot.
you must be disruptive. For you to be a content creator, you must be disruptive. And we live in an age where your academic qualifications don't matter anymore. Where the future of work is now focused on skill sets. The future of work is focused on what you do away from work, not what you're doing at work. So as a nurse, as a pharmacist, as a clinical officer, as a doctor, as a medic, as a frontline worker, think of innovative ways of telling stories from a disruptive perspective. Let's not tell stories from always a health, scientific, research, data perspective. Let's focus on human touch points. Let's just be human, and the more you are human, the more you are vulnerable. And for me, vulnerability is a strength. And it's a strength which medics, nurses, clinicals need to also adopt, where they can be vulnerable and just talk about their struggles. The more you open up about your challenges and struggles as a health practitioner, is the more the public will now start understanding. And don't forget to always reach out to your patient. You'll be surprised how your patient can actually make and endorse you. And use social media to build your brand. As in, work comes and goes, but what legacy are you leaving behind? As in, with all this information you have as a nurse, as a doctor, as a medic, what kind of values are you putting on social media? What kind of legacy are you leaving behind? Like, if you die today, what will you be remembered for? So as a medic, as a nurse, as a doctor, what I'll advise you is content creation is the future. And the future of content is collaboration. You have to collaborate with your patient, you have to collaborate with the hospital, you have to collaborate with your former school, your former college. Because if today, Amina, you make a mistake or do anything, or you win an award, your university will celebrate you, your school will celebrate you, your friends where you've worked for, they'll also celebrate you. So what I'd advise you is let's be the generation that tells our stories better. Let's be the generation that, archives our stories through positivity. Let's be the generation that brings the voice of the patient. Let's be the generation that adapts to the technology and use innovative ways to reshape our history. Today, if you go search on Google right now, if let's say Dr. Amina posts something on Twitter, if you go search Dr. Amina on Twitter, you will see her tweets. They're being archived. So as a medic, what's your footprint? What's your digital footprint? What kind of footprint are you leaving behind? Is it mentorship? Is it legacy? Is it storytelling? Is it preventive messages? Aspire to be a thought leader. So that's my parting shot. You never know, one kind of act online can actually change someone's life. You never know that one post you do on social media can inspire a patient. One post you do can actually bring change in our country and help tell our stories better.
Yeah. And thank you very much, Philip, for that. And I can't say enough about what you're saying. One tweet can make a big difference. I remember my personal tweet that made the most difference was on COVID when it came to registering chokoras in the best word that is relatable to most people. They didn't have IDs, they didn't have anything. And the Ministry of Health was kind enough to actually develop a system whereby they could be captured, because it didn't make sense sending them away and not giving them any vaccine. So in our spaces, we can do so much and we can achieve so much together in collaboration. And as long as we are consistent, a lot of things can happen. And I hope some of you can sign up with Philip if he has space for a lot of healthcare workers. I know I'd probably be in those spaces. I hope I'll be in those spaces for his fellowship. So thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. We hope we can arrange another session. And again, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much.